One thing I've always found really interesting about dreams is how often I can link it to something that happened to me the day before, or maybe something I was thinking about, or something that was troubling me. It's like, why the hell is that happening? Oh, it's probably because that happened yesterday, that sort of thing. There's a lot you can learn about yourself by examining your own dreams. I mean, like, they are just a random construction of what's up here after all, and what's up there is you, right? I love games that explore that concept. I love this idea of, like, trying to figure out what's going on with somebody just by looking at their dreams. Yumeniki is still easily my favorite example of this sort of thing, but no, today we're talking about a different RPG Maker horror game about dreams. We're talking Omori. This is a game that was made by Omocat. She's this independent artist that has a small clothing business online, featuring all sorts of badass original artwork. Her style is very surreal, a lot of color and weird characters. Definitely the sort of thing that feels very at home with the sorts of games that people in the RPG Maker community love to make and play. This game's got some pretty humble beginnings. It originally began as just a series of drawings posted on Tumblr, sketches of the Hikikomori character with text showing whatever they were thinking at the time. It was sort of set up like a blog from that character's perspective. We saw whatever they were thinking as they posted from their comfy, empty white void of nothingness. These blog posts eventually evolved into a comic, which ultimately became a video game. This was the medium of storytelling Omocat originally wanted to go with after all, at least according to the Kickstarter. Oh, and a successful Kickstarter it was, earning just over 10 times its goal. And it was pretty obvious that trailer left a pretty big impact. It used intense imagery and intense music to convey intense feelings. And with that, a decent amount of hype began to follow the project. Dude, I was hearing about this thing like way back when I first started this channel. I remember getting so many messages about it when I was first covering RPG Maker stuff like Lisa and Yumeniki fan games and stuff, and God, that feels like so long ago now, but, I get it. It's an indie RPG, and with limited resources, things can require a lot of patience to finish, but even still, it kind of feels surreal to see it finally come out. But the fact that it's out is probably the least surreal thing about this game. Omori promises to explore a bizarre dream world, one filled with new friends, new mysteries, and new horrors, all of which aren't exactly as new as we initially think. And well, I guess that sure sounds like something I'd like, I love games about exploration, love games that are surreal, and I love games that are scary. But most of all, I love games that journey the human mind. I mean, it is literally the single most complicated thing we as a species know about: the human brain. Us, people. There's so much to explore in this big old meaty mass of neurons, which is why I always get a little disappointed when I see these geniuses rolling into my comment sections with their 900 IQ, rolling their eyes, going like, oh great, another indie game about depression. It's like, come on, man. It's a broader topic than you realize. I feel like in the same way that you can make 1,000 games about Houston dudes or 1,000 games about platforming, I think you could make 1,000 games about the troubles up here, too. And with that said, this game does tackle a lot of things up here, which is something the game does make pretty clear right away. I will be exploring these themes later on into the video, so if these topics are a source of anxiety for you, or are things you generally don't like to hear about, here's your disclaimer. Though as always, I will try my best to discuss these things in as tasteful and respectful a way as I can. Though I won't be showing any of those flashing lights, so no worries there. Oh, RPG Maker, I've missed you so. Now this is how you play a video game. In a teeny tiny window that harnesses the game's native resolution in the center of your big screen. I'm also recording it with OBS and taking notes, so for me it looks like this, but hey, you gotta do what you gotta do. Ah, freaking nice. It's got DualShock support, dude. There's a plus. Always nice when it lets you use a controller, cause I don't know. I just hate playing 2D games with the keyboard. Can't do it. Can't do it. The title screen greets us with this cold, blank stare. Omori, our central character, standing idly there with a little bit of animation to give him a coarse but fluid texture. The gentle sound of piano washes over us. Yet something seems wrong. No, it's not just the emptiness surrounding Omori. It's not just the unsettling lack of emotion on his face either. It's something in the sound. Accompanying the piano is, I don't know, it's something. There's some unsettling sound behind it if you listen close enough. Like something else is there, or maybe something's trying to be there? I don't know. We awake in white space, this place of total emptiness that we've been living in as long as we can remember. Booting up our computer reveals our diary, which shows us a safe, mundane life of bouncing between living in nothing and hanging out with friends. We have a tissue box for wiping away our tears, a sketchbook full of the drawings of a troubled child, and our cat, whose only purpose is to ask us, "You waiting for something to happen?" A black light bulb hangs from the ceiling. If you look inside, you can't see anything. And if you try to leave your little spot, these red hands will come and bring it back to your cozy safe square. The only exit is a big white door, so let's go through. Well, that's a lot better. On the other side is this vibrant dream world, full of friends that we know and love. There's Kel, the lovable dumb kid who doesn't know how to keep his mouth shut. Aubrey, a spunky young girl with a hot temper and a killer swing. And Hero, Kel's older brother. He's the oldest, so he keeps the kids in check when they get too rowdy. He also loves cooking and making his friends cookies. Wait, cookie, oh, it's called a cookie because you cook it. I am an idiot. I am a drooling moron. These kids all got their big, colorful, fun clubhouse where they play cards and have fun. I like this guy. That's a funny little guy. Actually, that's a funny big guy, but there are a lot of funny little guys in the game too, like the space buddies and wormholes. I especially love these dial-up computers that use attacks to slow your party down. That's really clever. Before long, we meet with our other friends at the park. There's Mary, the oldest and most mature of the group, with an affinity for picnics, and Basil, the shy kid who loves flowers and taking pictures. Soon after we meet all these characters, we're already flipping through an album of memories. All the good times, the fun friendships, every little moment. But Omori sticks out like a sore thumb. The way he lacks the color of his friends, the mute expression, even this fun picture asking us to guess whose feet is whose. We know exactly which one's Omori right away, while all the others are indistinguishable. We then head on over to Basil's house where he shows us all the gardens that he tends to. That's really sweet. Everything seems great, but then something bad happens. After looking through more photos, Basil notices one that falls out, and after he looks at it, things go wrong. No, that can't be. Mary. She... Ripped straight out of the troubling situation, we're brought right back to white space. Okay, so clearly this room is a self-defense mechanism. Omori would rather feel absolutely nothing than whatever the hell his dream was about to make him remember. After that happens, Basil goes missing, and that becomes the central focus of the game's story. We go on a big, wacky quest through tons of different elaborate RPG scenarios as we try to figure out what happened to him, meeting tons of characters and fighting dudes along the way. It is an RPG after all. Oh, dude, okay, the battle system is a really big step up from the simple systems you usually see in older RPG Maker games. Firstly, I love the look of it, man. All the characters, they're represented with full-sized artwork, all of which have some extra frames of idle animation to make it a lot more visually interesting. I really love this scribbly look the game takes on. I think it does a really good job of embracing that childlike wonder that we get to view the game's story through. There's a lot of really endearing quirks of the battle system too, like how you become toast when a party member faints. So of course, jam's gotta be the revival item, right? And I love how when there's a critical attack, it hits right in the heart. Like, ooh, hit you right there. I like that a lot. You've got your 4 party members on the 4 corners of the screen, and it's really cool watching the battle animations all stem from each character's portrait. You might notice that sometimes they'll be in a different mood too. Yeah, this is actually a huge part of the gameplay, the emotion system. So you guys know how RPGs usually go with weaknesses and stuff. You know, you got the rock, paper, scissors, the water beats fire, fire beats ice, blah, 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 blah. This system is a much more dynamic version of that sort of idea because these elements are never static. An enemy will never be inherently weak to one thing. No, it instead depends on what mood they're in. So there's 3 emotions you and your friends can harness. There's anger, sadness, and happiness, each of which will affect how your character performs in battle in a different way. Happiness will increase your crit rate but lower your accuracy. Anger increases your strength but lowers your defense. And sadness, that'll lower your attack but increase your defense. That's just so accurate, isn't it? You know, like when you're angry, you lash out but you leave yourself vulnerable. When you're sad, you close on down to block everything out. And when you're happy, you're giving it your all. You're super energetic and without a care in the world, which is interpreted here as lower accuracy. And things get even more interesting when you consider which ones are strong against others. So again, it's rock, paper, scissors. Happiness beats anger, anger beats sad, and sad beats happy. Higher defense and lower attack? Well, being stronger will fix that. Don't have to worry about your defense either. They got low attack, they're not gonna do shit. Happiness won't really crit through that defense though, giving sadness the edge against happy. But on the other hand, happy's high critical rate will destroy anger's low defense. Each of these 3 emotions are able to be harnessed or inflicted on an enemy by using the skills your party members have. Omori's got skills that can make him, his friends, or his foes sad. Kel can annoy people to make them angry. Aubrey can encourage her friends to make them happy, and Hiro mostly has like general support moves like debuffs and healing, but he does start with a massage move that can remove an emotion from a friend or foe. Some of these moves are exclusive to your party, but most of them can be used on your party and enemies alike. Depending on what emotions your enemies are feeling, you'll want to get your party into the right headspace so they can deal with the situation. You can cheese a lot of it by getting Omori to make them sad on the first turn, and making Kel make Aubrey angry, then using Aubrey's strong attack, but I kinda wish I didn't do that for half the game because as effective as it can be, there are other more interesting strategies. Enemies can also inflict emotions on you as well, so you won't always be able to do that anyway. You will have to react accordingly, maybe removing emotions or inflicting a counter emotion back. Now this emotion system already feels like a huge step above most RPG Maker battle systems, but it ain't done there. No, we've also got these follow-up attacks. So every time a party member takes damage, you'll gradually fill up this meter at the bottom, and you can use those points to perform extra moves that'll call out to one of the 3 other party members. You can do that with a quick tap of the D-pad after somebody's done a standard attack, and that'll prompt one extra action from the friend that you selected. What makes this so cool and so freaking clever is that they're all based on the relationships between these characters. You know, the ones that you kinda have to get a feel for by observing the way they talk to each other in the cutscenes. For example, Hiro's really supportive, so he'll heal his friends, and Kel's rambunctious, so he throws his ball at somebody else to deflect back at the enemy, stuff like that. Unlike the other 3, Omori actually does not interact with his friends for his follow-up attacks. Instead, he can attack again, trip the enemy, or launch an all-out super attack if the meter is full. And with that said, keep in mind that we're inside a dream world. We're living through a platter of brain matter. This is inside Omori's head, so this is likely how he views his friend dynamic. His friends all do things for him, they interact with him, they hang out with him, but he doesn't do much back. He's not uninterested, just unwilling, and that has to stem from something. And being a game with elements of psychological horror, we will find what that something is as we explore these colorful, wacky dreams. We'll encounter this something a number of different times. It's depicted as this weird shadow that only you can see, making you afraid of something you don't even know. Mechanically too, there's a 4th emotion, fear. And in Omori, fear is not something that has pros and cons, just cons. It's something you gotta battle with, something you have to figure out how the hell to deal with. You usually only encounter fear when something is present, but what is something? Is it walking down the stairs in the middle of the night to grab something to eat? Is it walking through a spider web in the dark? Sometimes it does seem like it's that simple, but as you play on, it becomes very evident that all of these fears stem from something much more sinister. It'll taunt you the entire journey. This is where those elements of psychological horror often come into play, shattering through this idealized fantasy of hanging with friends, all those good memories, is that something. And it'll follow you and get worse and worse the more you try to escape into this perfect false reality. Running just makes it worse. But every time you do face it head on, you will learn another way to cope. You learn a new skill each time. Not a debuff or a stronger attack, but how to calm down, how to focus, how to persist. There's a stark contrast between the adventures you have with your friends and that something that'll follow. It's this big, endearing adventure, a series of human moments, fun scenarios, and fond memories, like trying to search a galactic junkyard for a mixtape that belongs to the space pirate, or the classic, getting eaten by a whale and sailing around his stomach looking for something that he swallowed, or being thrown into the dungeon, trapped in a castle overrun with these weird mole sprout guys that worship this spoiled brat whose ridiculous ego destroys everything around her. Some of the enemies here are really funny. Like, you get to fight all these mole sprout knights that continually avenge their fathers. I love these guys that are just not prepared at all. They're just a regular mole sprout with like a spear taped to them. This poor freaking guy, dude. He's trying his best, but it ain't very good. Omori is chock full of all those ridiculous plot lines and scenarios that you'd expect from your favorite goofy RPGs, each one fleshing out these characters more and more. Along the way, you'll use the tag system to swap out party members, putting a different person out front so they can use a unique ability on the overworld. Omori can use his knife to cut through obstacles, Aubrey can use her bat to destroy large objects, Kel can throw stuff, like triggering mechanisms and whatever, and Hiro can use his irresistible charm to sway the NPCs in your favor. It's not really as interesting as overworld abilities in some other RPG games, like Paper Mario, definitely not as robust as that, but it is a good little change of pace every now and then, and I do like having an excuse to put a different character in the lead for a little bit. Ooh, and the photos that pop in every time you swap, there's a unique one for every character, switching to every character character, 12 images in total. That is some amazing detail. And that's not the only detail, dude. You're gonna find a lot of that in this game. There's tons of funny dialogue, small bone, big bone, stuff like that really gets me. There's a ton of optional side quests too. Most of them kind of just boil down to fetching something, but the surrounding plots are usually endearing enough to make them worth doing just to see what the characters say. I really like this one where nobody shows up to this ghost party, so you have to send out invites to all the other ghosts you found along the game. What really gets me about this screen is that the balloons don't say happy birthday. They say, ooh. That's really good. There's even optional areas too, like this one here I didn't even see on my first playthrough. I finished the entire game without even knowing about it. The game's about 15 to 20 hours long normally, but ooh, you could easily get a lot more out of it if you do all the side stuff. And that's really as far as we can go before getting into like spoiler-ish territory. I do want to talk more about this game, but these segments are definitely best enjoyed blind, so if what I've shown and said so far has made you want to play this thing, stop the video now. I have a link down below to where you can get it, and I'm serious. I get a lot of comments from people saying they wish they didn't watch the spoilers. And listen, I care a lot more about getting people to have cool experiences than I care about the watch time on a damn YouTube video. I'll get into the major spoilers later on. I'll have a timestamp to skip those ones, but for now we're going to tackle the minor twists, since it does lead into a large portion of the game. The whole game doesn't take place in the dream world. Some sections are played in real life. Between chapters, you'll find yourself waking up in an empty house. You're moving away in 3 days. Everything's packed and ready to go. All right, what can we do here? We can go in the bathroom and look in the mirror. Okay, you know how in like Undertale you look in the mirror and it's like, it's you, and then later in the game it has that really cute payoff? This made me feel the polar opposite. Is that me? Is that me? Omori looks way older and still completely void of any emotion. These are the segments of the game where you'll find most of that psychological horror. Here's where you'll usually encounter something. First introduced when Omori wakes up in the middle of the night just to get some food. Even just going down the stairs to the kitchen requires an intense battle with it. That's how bad of a place he's in right now. In order to escape the dream world, you have to get Omori to stab himself awake. There's several references to this knife, and it is Omori's weapon of choice in the dream world, and based on other imagery, it's sort of implied that Omori engages in self-harm, which is troubling. You know, I know that can stem from guilt. Maybe that's what something is, guilt? This game's gonna keep you guessing what something is the whole ride. One thing this game does that I think is kinda cool is how you're always posed with yes or no questions, giving us a say in whether or not Omori has the courage to do every minor thing. For example, mustering up the courage to open the front door when somebody knocks. It's Kel! Oh my god, it's Kel! He's so much older, he's so different, oh yeah, I guess we're moving away in 3 days. He came to visit us, and he's surprised we even opened the door at all. So yeah, it turns out Omori is a kid named Sunny. He's been a shut-in for a number of years after something happened, and for the first time in years, he's outdoors having fun with Kel, just like old times. But what about the others? These are my favorite parts of the game. When you leave the dream world and see Sunny's actual reality, you see everything and everyone that inspired the characters and locations of his dreams. And by extension, despite being a silent protagonist, we get a really good idea of how Sunny feels about every which thing. For example, that awful spoiled brat from the castle. She was clearly inspired by this obnoxious lady that runs this candy store. Clearly, Sunny never liked being around her as a kid. No, I was really thrown off when I saw Aubrey, dude. She barely even looks the same at all, now a cynical husk of her former joyful self. That squabbling between her and Kel, it evolved into straight up hatred for one another. She now hangs out with a bit of a bad crowd, bullying people that she used to consider friends, even fight her to try and defend Basil, who's now this horrible, anxious wreck of a teenager. God, I know you play as little kids fighting stuff all the time in games, but here's something about it doesn't feel good, man. You're not on this big fantasy adventure fighting off cartoon characters anymore. No, like, these are troubled kids hurting each other. And when you click that attack button on Aubrey and you land your first hit, that's when you remember Sunny has a knife. Just like that, this game ripped me straight out of a fantasy and grounded me back in reality. This video game RPG fight, this was no longer a boss battle. I just assaulted somebody I used to care about with a knife. and she reacts as if somebody just assaulted her with a knife. You do eventually figure out what it was that made everything fall apart. The game takes its time giving you that info, and little tiny pieces that let you keep guessing, but it also lets you see how everything's been affected long before you know the cause of it. And I think that was a really smart choice, because you spend the first chunk of this portion really hating Aubrey. You don't know why she's acting like this, so she just seems awful. She bullies these kids with intense trauma, she takes Basil's photo album, all of his memories of friends he can't see anymore, she steals that from him. But the fight with her in the church? Oh my god. She stands before you with this intense, burning rage, feelings that a teenager who knows real trauma could never figure out how to deal with, and you just have to hear everybody in the church berate her as the fight goes on, questioning how her parents raised her, criticizing the way she dresses, who she hangs out with, as you watch her emotionally crumble before you. And when you get the album back from Aubrey and you look through all those pictures again, and they just take on this completely new meaning now that you really know who all these characters are. Oh, I hit you right there, man. They feel so much more lively. Those fuzzy blue memories, fully realized with the cozy warmth of their favorite summer. Now with more flavor text fully explaining what was happening in each moment, instead of it being a faint memory. Sonny no longer looks so out of place here. He's not gloomily rubbing up against a faint memory of being happy. No, here, he's actually happy. Still kinda shy and aloof, but yeah, he's happy. But as much as things seem to go back to normal, there's still that something that persists. And we can't exactly talk about something without getting into the major spoilers. So hey, if you made it this far into the video and the minor spoilers got you wanting to give it a shot, you still got a chance to bail before I get into the really big spoilers. I'd recommend finishing the game before watching this part of the video, so as usual, here's a timestamp to skip the spoilers. Okay, so that something, it's Mary. When everybody was really young, she took her own life, and that affected everybody, obviously. Hiro was closest to her, being the only one who was the same age as her, and there was even possible romantic feelings between the two as well. There's a really sad moment where you're visiting Mary's grave with Kel, and he explains how Hiro took it really bad. He stopped caring about everything. He wouldn't eat or take care of himself, or anything for that matter. He was like that for almost a year straight. But man, when you see Hiro IRL for the first time on the final day, and he's still this headstrong dude who can make the best of everything, there's a sense of comfort when you see somebody who's gotten through something you're all still struggling with, and when you see him now and he's still just like you remember him, even though there was a long period where he very much wasn't. Kel's the youngest, so he kinda had the most trouble figuring out how the hell to react to the whole thing. He didn't know how to be there for his friends, so he just distracted himself with sports, trying to move on. It might seem like he doesn't really care sometimes, but he does, he just doesn't know how to show it. And that really affected Aubrey. She looked up to Mary like a sister. They were even gonna dye their hair together, which is why Aubrey dyes it pink in her memory. After Mary's passing, all of Aubrey's friends seemingly vanished, which she kind of took as everybody abandoning her. But, they weren't really abandoning her, they're all just trying to cope with it in their own confused way, but to Aubrey it's like, why are none of you here for me? I hate all of you, I hate all of you, I hate all of you. And Sonny, well, Mary was Sonny's older sister. She's family, and that hurt so bad he became a shut-in. He stopped coming to school and eventually stopped leaving the house altogether. At one point, we journey deep enough into Sonny's mind that we find black space. If white space is a comforting nothingness, then black space is everything at once. No order, just random memories and thoughts and feelings cluttering a dark, looping void of unorganized madness as the music begins to make less and less sense. This is where the game goes full on Yume Nikki. And for the exact same reason that makes Yume Nikki so cool, this is one of the most interesting parts of the game to interpret because it's just raw, random thoughts. We are inside Sonny's brain and we see all of this random stuff. We could probably point out a lot of these things and make sense of it all. Everybody was dealt different emotions to try and cope with it. For Hiro it was sadness, Aubrey was anger, Kel tried to find happiness, Sonny chose total emptiness, and Basil? Oh, Basil. For Basil, it's an intense, consuming fear. Basil is clearly one of the most currently troubled by this. Every interaction with him in the real world, he's always full of anxiety, as if he's barely teetering on the edge of having a full-on psychotic break. So on the final day, after everybody opens up to each other and they come to an understanding, we realize that we do have to save Basil. Not this fake, made-up version of him in her head, but the real Basil. The one suffering from real problems, shutting himself in just like Sonny did. So the four of you decide to sleep over in his living room, to be there in case something happens. This is where you have one final dream, a nightmare from hell that has Sonny reliving all of his trauma. Along the way, you discover more photos that, piece by piece, tell the story of the night something happened. Sunny used to love listening to Mary play this one song on piano. She was a big perfectionist, so she would just practice over and over, playing it again and again, and one day they got Sunny a violin so he could play along with her, and yeah, that kind of became their thing together as brother and sister playing that song, and Mary was always better at it. Sunny would fall behind, but he'd try his best, and the two were practicing for a big recital they were going to do together. But before they could get there, they had some sort of disagreement, which prompted Sunny to shove her down the stairs. We never know exactly why he shoves her. Maybe they got in a fight, maybe part of him hated her for pushing him so hard, maybe it was the frustration of not being good enough, not being able to keep up. She falls down the stairs and lays on the ground. Sunny brings her all the way back up and puts her in bed, hoping she'll wake up. She doesn't wake up. Basil, being Sunny's best friend, offers him help. Somebody's dead and these kids are 11. Like, what the fuck do we do? I don't know. What do we do? Like, what do we fucking do? They bring Mary's body out into the woods and use a jump rope to stage it as a suicide. Everybody else would think Mary took her own life, while Sunny and Basil, they would live on with the guilt of what really happened. They were just confused children trying to stay out of trouble, but they made it so much worse. This is why Sunny's afraid of stairs, spiders, drowning, this window, this piano. It's not because he's afraid of these things and what they can do to him. It's because he so strongly associates them with Mary. That's what something is. That's what something is. The guilt of killing somebody that meant the entire world to him and his friends, and covering it up and running away instead of facing it. The broken violin would become a symbol of the disrepair Sunny did to himself and others. It was the central thing that linked him to Mary, and the frustration surrounding it is where this event stemmed from. It was so stressful picking up all those photos, dude. You get them out of order, getting this fuzzy idea of what's happening, and then the game makes you put them in order, organizing your memories and learning the truth. Oh my god, dude, like this whole sequence, man, absolutely brilliant. There's a number of different ways the ending can unfold, depending on your actions during the final part of the game, where you wake up in the middle of the night. Here you can take a look at all your friends, all having a sleepover for the final time. You will really miss them. Oh. The game can end prematurely if you decide to run away from Basil's house, and going home to sleep in your own bed has you waking up to sirens a block away. Your mom comes to pick you up and drives you to your new home as you have to think about how those sirens are likely headed to Basil's house. You can also get an ending where Sunny takes his own life. If you go to sleep after grabbing a knife from the kitchen, the possibility of this ending gives that line of dialogue a very chilling double meaning. If you go right back to sleep in Basil's living room instead of going home, you get an even worse ending. You see firsthand that Basil did in fact take his own life. Now, the true ending occurs if the player decides to confront Basil in the middle of the night. By now, it's pretty clear that Basil is terrified of losing the things he loves. He lost Mary, he lost his best friend after he stopped going outdoors, he recently just lost his grandmother, and now that he can finally see his best friend again after all these years, they're about to move away. He's lost everything his entire life, and he can't handle losing anything else. And the boss fight that ensues is a tough one. The fight isn't difficult. I mean, it's difficult to watch. Two kids that both did something horrible together with no idea how to deal with what that did to them, so they lash out at each other, confused, afraid, and violent. But we can get through this. This is where all of those skills you learned each time you confronted something come into play. Finally, after facing each manifestation of it and learning step by step how to handle this, we finally put those skills to the test. And they don't work. For the first time in the entire game, we see Sunny's fear get even worse. Yeah, it's almost like it's not that simple or something, right? I was so ready for this game to just hit me with the most formulaic, oh, you learn the RPG moves to deal with your depression and you just do them at the end and everything's okay. But no, Omori understands that it's a lot more complicated than that. So we tumble into... We wake up somewhere warmer. What is this? Oh, are we remembering the good times? Not this fake, perfect version of what we think these good times were, but the real memories. The ones we could no longer feel because we chose to feel nothing. All of those pictures from the album, after we're done reliving our trauma, the game makes us relive those moments too. The bad memories came back, but so did the good ones. After we realize just what it is we've forgotten, it strengthens us. We want that back, and we are going to face what we have to get it, even though it will be the hardest thing Sunny ever does. One final showdown, not with a goofy boss, but with us, Omori. The part of us that hates herself, the part of us that isn't really us, the part of us that hurts herself, the part of us that looks back in the mirror. This is the ultimate battle because we're fighting to get ourself back. And you know, it's probably here where you start to realize that depression doesn't just latch onto one thing. It latches onto fucking everything, man, and it uses it all against you. Sunny, being the less sociable one of the group, he sticks out a little bit. His friends are usually the ones to reach out to him. He had trouble being the one to start stuff. But that's fine, you know, these are things his friends get. They understand, they help him with that. There's nothing wrong with being that way. Some people just need a little push. But to Sunny, these are unwanted feelings of selfishness. Well, at least his brain's gonna try and convince him of that. Any justification as to why you're a horrible human that you want to be erased, it will look for anything. There's also nothing wrong with desiring self-betterment, but in some minds, it can just manifest in the most self-destructive way possible. In a brilliant sequence of events, we balance those skills. We don't just use them when the game tells us to. No, now they have mechanical functions. We have to desperately figure out on the fly how to effectively use these things to survive. These skills aren't a magic solution, but they are part of the fight. With each passing turn, Omori lowers all of your stats, making the fight harder and harder the longer it drags on. That's pretty accurate, isn't it? It's not even possible to beat this thing without losing first and choosing to continue. It's a pretty clever depiction of a battle with mental health, because here it's understood that these battles are long, complicated, and filled with uncertainty. In fact, you can choose to give up during that game over screen, giving you an ending where Sunny gives up and embraces Omori, falling back into his desperate escapism before waking up in a hospital and hurtling himself off the balcony. Winning the fight instead has us walking over to Basil's room. Finally, with the strength to do the hardest thing he's ever done, Sunny speaks the first words we hear from him all game. I have to tell you something. After the credits, the title screen changes. Omori is now Sunny again, which means he's probably no longer running away, and that hollow, strange sound that accompanied the piano is replaced with the sounds of the morning air. You'd think the violin would be there now, but I think the absence of it, despite the positive tone shift, kind of feels like acceptance, you know? Like something that was pushed so hard on him didn't end the way he wanted, but that's okay. We can still remember what was. Even if we can't remember a version of the song that could have existed if things were better, we can still remember the version that we did love listening to. The version Mary would play. That memory is alive once more, and now it doesn't have to be scary. This ending left me with a lot of emotions, man. Like, it's terrifying doing something you've been afraid of your whole life, even if you know, like, you have to do it for things to change for the better. But the thing is, like, with enough patience and support and persistence, it's not impossible. You can get there, even if it never truly gets all the way better, you know? Getting here feels earned because of the choices we helped Sunny find the courage to make. When you're in that dark a place, even saying yes to something as small as a high five can be difficult. That's a human interaction, one we haven't had in years. It might seem silly to some people, but hey, that is a step. It's those sorts of little victories that Omori allows us to win along the way. And I feel like that's also an important part of depicting mental health. There's a lot in this game that point towards Sunny detesting himself for letting others do everything for him, for having no desire to take any sort of action himself, and that is a real feeling right there. You know you have to do something, you know that you're a component in this too, but you just can't find a way to push yourself. Finding that push step by step, little by little, giving yourself permission to be the one to walk forward. And Sunny choosing to go to his friends at the end instead of waiting for them to come to him, that's how we know he's finally working on that. There's a lot to learn about what's going on in Sunny's head, and interestingly enough, the game lets us see what happens if we don't allow ourselves those little victories. If we never take that long, patient journey to find that push, it sends us down a much darker path. You can regress back into that fantasy and beat the entire game without ever leaving the house. This, my friends, is how we go down the Hikikomori route. You know, like when a game's got an ending that's so bad, you gotta do a fresh playthrough and make certain choices for it. In this route, you never have the courage to open that door. You never experience any of the outdoor segments. Here, you do save Basil in the dream world, but as we know from the main ending, Basil needed saving in the real world. This made-up version of him doesn't actually matter at all. Oh, Oh, there he is. Yay, at the picnic with Mary again. Oh, want to look through the album again? Sure. Yeah, it's like great memories. Everything's all good again. God, it is so depressing doing this after getting the true ending. Sonny decides to leave everything blocked out. He sticks with these fainter, fake memories and never gets to reunite with the real ones. Ending the game on this route just gives you one of the bad endings you could get anyway, but what makes this route so interesting is all of the extra content it has. Yeah, like there's whole-ass boss fights and even entire sections unique to this playthrough. Those feelings of guilt, they start to manifest. Something will follow you more and more closely, and the optional super bosses you unlock, they represent Sonny's suppressed feelings, starting to bleed through the flimsy bandage that is this dream world. Some of the freakiest stuff happens on this route. Again, the ending's not much different, which is a bit disappointing, but it's still worth doing a second playthrough for if you want to explore more of the game's horror side. You also get a lot more hints and context for some of the things we've seen Sonny do. And of course, there's a lot more content to get here too. There's a buttload of game here, dude. It's not a short one. The main quest took me about 20 hours to get through. Alternate route will bring that up to 30, depending on how fast you fly through it, I guess. But you could probably even double that if you want to do all the side stuff, too. This is a meaty game for something made in RPG Maker. No wonder it took so long to make. I'd say it was well worth the wait. It's easy to tell that a lot of care went into this thing. The artwork is fantastic, the animation is great, the writing is believable and hard-hitting, and the characters are an absolute delight. The battle system is like actually really interesting for RPG Maker too, and the worlds are as bubbly and cute as they are mysterious and haunting. The only real gripes I have with the game, the big one is the before mentioned lack of a more unique ending for the alternate route. I feel like there could have been something there. I also feel like the dialogue can be skipped a little faster. Going through the game again takes a bit long because of that. And the fast travel system is a little bulky too. Having it available from the pause menu instead would have saved me a lot of time. I've seen some people express minor disappointment in not really getting all of the pieces of the backstory, but I don't know, I kind of like that actually. I think hinting at a backstory with a subtler things you take from the dream world and making the finer details more open to interpretation, that can be a lot more fun than if the game flat out told us. I had a good time debating with a friend what certain characters and events in the dream world could represent, and I think people are going to have a lot of fun discussing the game online because of that. Omori is a beautiful video game, dude. Like, this is something that's going to hit really hard for people that have struggled with similar feelings, and you know, even if you're not, it explores psychological horror in really clever ways. Like, if you like man versus self plots, that internal struggle, you know, unwrapping a character's guilt through the lens of subtle horror, Omori is a really grounded and childlike take on that sort of thing. You know, the big, goofy, wacky RPG adventure with all your friends, before you find out the big adventure is just a tiny bandage on a gaping wound. You're gonna see the pain spill through the cracks. The game is 20 bones on Steam, but there's also a Switch port down the way too. I remember this thing was originally headed to 3DS and Vita, but I totally understand those getting shelved at this point. Yeah, I'd absolutely recommend it, whether you're into games that explore psychological horror, or games that do a really good job of tackling the subject of mental health, or simply a well-written story with fantastic characters. Whatever reason you play the game for, I can at least guarantee you one thing though. It's gonna hit ya. Right there. Yo, what's good? Welcome to the end of the video. I'm glad you watched it. I hope you liked it. It was kind of cool talking about mental health for once, even if I do feel pretty underqualified to talk about it. I only really have very limited experiences with anxiety, you know, nothing like this. I've only got secondhand experiences to go off of in that regard. So I hope all that made sense, and I hope I handled it well. Now we playing Jimmy Neutron, baby!